So, what we are speaking of in coming to be the being is aligning with nature, aligning with true essence nature. And the same one nature is shared by all beings in the one being. When there is an alignment with nature, we are aligning into such profundity. We are aligning in being into the vast oneness of all that is. We are aligning in being the being with truth, the one truth, the whole truth. We are aligning with divine wholeness. We are aligning back into the remembering of true essence nature and surrendering the singular point of the me into the remembering of infinite, eternal wholeness. We are aligning into a flow of evolutionary consciousness in its natural flow. This is a universal happening that is always happening. There is no separation. There are no separate ones. There is a universal movement of consciousness to evolve within its own self, to know itself. And when we come to rest in the presence of being, we are aligning with an evolutionary process that is universal and already in full swing. We are moving into a river, a current, a flow of life, a flow that is ongoing. And in aligning with being, we are saying yes to being one with this evolutionary flow that is in a divine momentum to know itself and to bring the knowing of itself as a shining light to the surface of life. So aligning with the being is aligning with all that is in the most profound way. And yet to start with, we generally don't recognize the profundity of the universal process that we are joining with. Because to start with, we can feel to be an individual. And this individuality surrenders into the oneness. But it is only through the process of refinement that this oneness is deeply remembered and recognized enough to really open to the profundity of what this truly is. That there is nothing personal, nothing individual, and no gain for the me in this. And yet, in the surrender of the me into this, everything that has been longed for by the me is gained. Because everything that is longed for by the me is the true nature. It is the true essence nature. Now, the longing of the me is an interpretation of a deep and profound rooted longing and the longing is the flow of grace itself. The longing, we could say, is the divine longing for you to wake up and know yourself and join with this one universal evolutionary flow of consciousness to know itself and evolve out of the darkness of ignorance and open to the light of true essence nature. Every being is invited into this grace. There is no one that is left out. Every being is invited. You do not have to be special or particular. In fact, it is the surrender of specialness and separation that allows a joining into the grace that is already flowing. Now, every being is already one with this, of course. It is all about the perspective of seeing and the subtle perception of the field in its fineness, in the fine, fine, and finer frequencies of essence nature. The starting point of this alignment with true essence nature is really about an alignment that is restoring and remembering the natural connection to the being, remembering the natural connection to source, to essence nature. And in this, it is the most profound restoring of what keeps us away as an obscuration. And this restoration is of trust. It's the natural flow of a trust in the divine, in nature to know what is natural, in nature to know how to harmonize and balance, in nature to know what to create as an appearance in the life in order to bring each being deeper into this flow of grace that is a natural trajectory of universal evolutionary unraveling of consciousness into itself. There is nothing personal in this. It is all about coming to the presence of being and being the being. When resting in the being, it is resting in the alive presence, which is the natural, simple presence of being. And resting in the presence of being, there is this opening in the subtle perception of consciousness itself to be conscious of itself. The subtle perception is consciousness's ability to be consciously awake and aware of itself, and for the intelligence of consciousness to read itself, to know itself. So if we start at the beginning, we open to the felt sense of presence, of just simply being here just as you are, and coming to be aware of your own presence, to be aware of your own existence. To be aware, we could say, of simply being here, being here. Could also say the felt sense, I am, I am. So we come to the simple felt sense of being, the presence that is before the first thought. It does not matter if thinking is happening. We are not trying to stop thinking. We are inviting an alignment with the stillness, and attention will naturally realign with itself. Wherever awareness is where you are in truth. So to be aware of the presence is already aligning with the awareness of being that is the true essence nature. Of course, we can give the instruction to rest here, but the habit of attention is to identify with the moving, changing. And so it can feel hard to rest here when the habit is to keep identifying with thought. But it is just to be aware of this habit, to simply be aware of everything without attempting as the doer to change anything, just to be here and be aware as the aware being. And this allows there to be a natural realigning of focus. Because the aware being wants to know itself. It wants to be itself. Yes, there is a great habitual pull of the patternings of consciousness for the attention to go back towards the moving, changing. But just to be aware of this patterning, of this habit, is to illuminate it as the light of awareness. Now, the light of awareness is a very profound light, as is the light of consciousness, because the light of awareness and the light of consciousness, it is the same light. It is divine light. And this light is not like a worldly light. This light is the illuminating principle of God. It is the illuminating principle that has the power to illuminate, and in the power to illuminate, the depth of illumination is a revealing and an exposure that can shift the patternings of consciousness just through the light shining upon the patterns. And this is because the light is what consciousness is actually in truth drawn to. So for the light to shine, consciousness naturally redirects its patterning that is habitual and redirects itself to the light. And the light is the purity of pure consciousness. So the redirection of consciousness in its patterning and its distortions can happen naturally through the illumination of conscious awareness and the light that illuminates habits. So there is no doing involved. It is just to be aware. And as awareness focuses, it illuminates what is discordant and habitual, egocentric patterning. And it invites a natural freeing from conditioned habitual patternings by drawing the attention of consciousness to itself, to its true nature, to its essence nature, which is light, resonating, vibrant light. So there is no doing in this. It is just to be here and be aware. Now, as the aware being, there is a natural noticing of a witnessing consciousness. The witnessing consciousness is presence consciousness that is aware of the moving, changing. And as witnessing consciousness is aware of the moving, changing, it starts to recognize all by itself, naturally, that what it is somehow independent from the moving, changing. So as the witnessing awareness, even when attention is witnessing the moving, changing, there is a naturalness in the aware being, in the awareness of consciousness, the conscious awareness that starts to recognize, if I am aware of the moving, changing, and I am not moved and changed, I am still and free and simply here being aware, then I am independent from the moving, changing. I am not bound by the moving, changing. And what I am is not defined by the moving, changing. What I am is somehow completely independent of the moving, changing. And so consciousness starts to be consciously awake and aware of itself in its witnessing capacity, that it's witnessing the moving, changing patterns of consciousness, but it has this still, silent, unmoved part, which of course is the awareness. And as it starts to recognize that it is independent from the patterns of consciousness, it naturally starts to be aware more of itself. What am I? Who am I? What am I that is not moving and changing? What am I that is independent and free of the thoughts and the body consciousness? What am I that is peaceful and still in the face of all that is moving? And it comes to a deeper sense of being itself. It starts to relax. And in the relaxation, recognize itself in the innermost being. It starts to remember, oh, this is what I am. This is what the I truly is this silent peace, this silent being that just is. This is the true nature. This is the essence nature. This is the source of all that is moving and changing. And this is the true nature of what I am, or what the I actually is. So there is a naturalness here that we open to the presence of being, can feel the aliveness of the presence of being, your presence of being. And as you feel the aliveness, this is your consciousness. The aliveness is consciousness, conscious of itself, recognizing its own aliveness. And then the felt sense of the alive presence, being alive and everywhere. The alive presence is inside and outside. It's in the environment. So just to be aware of the alive presence that is consciousness, alive and awake to itself naturally already. And as we invite the attention to shift, to recognize the aliveness of the presence, we are inviting the attention to shift towards the consciousness that is here in a pure and free way, and not the mind consciousness that is moving in habituated patterns and in limited patterns, right? So we're opening the consciousness to notice more spaciousness. And naturally, consciousness starts to recognize this universal process that is the flow of consciousness. And it is drawn to this flow because this is the purity of the field that is flowing and awake and alive. So we enter this wherever we enter. It is different for each being, the entry to this. But as these words come, enter where you feel the resonance, enter alignment in the resonance, in the felt sense, where the resonance, the frequency, is a resonance of recognition, where you feel truth, where you recognize the aliveness of presence, where you feel alignment, where you feel enlivened in the presence of being. Stay aligned and receiving the grace of the aliveness as it is recognized. Fall in, let go, and fall in. Because this is falling into the naturalness, falling into the flow, falling into consciousness, being consciously aware of itself in the alive presence. And here in the alive presence, awareness starts to be aware of itself first as like an external layer that is witnessing. It's like the outermost layer of pure awareness is witnessing and focused upon the moving, changing. But as there is a deeper recognition, this witnessing of the moving, changing, watching the thoughts, watching the body sensations, watching the sense perceptions, watching all that is moving and changing, this aliveness of consciousness, conscious of itself, that's witnessing and looking outward, starts to look more inward naturally. What am I? What am I that is here now? Yes, aware of the moving, changing, but what am I in truth? If I am aware of the thinking and aware of the body sensations, and if I am aware and watching the person that I thought that I was, that I thought that the I was, then what is this I in truth? And this I am presence in truth starts to open to recognize the true essential nature as being the being. That I am presence is I am before the first thought, before any sense of attachment and definition through body consciousness. That I am presence recognizes itself to just simply be here now, just like this. That I am presence recognizes itself in the innermost silence and stillness of being, to just simply be here. And this enlivens the stillness and the silence of the moment, as silence itself silently recognizes itself simply being here in the stillness, in the deep peace of this moment, underneath the layers of the moving changing, and therefore underneath the layers of mind consciousness and body consciousness, there is this wellspring of pure consciousness that is the flow of being, knowing itself. It may be first recognized as a deep silence, a deep stillness, a peace that is undisturbable. And in this peace, the being recognizes itself. It can recognize itself in this peace, in this stillness, because there is nothing else, no mind consciousness moving and changing, just the being simply being, and in that able to recognize itself, just simply being here and recognizing the essence nature as silence, still, unmoving, unchanging, and pure awareness. You can feel the sense of being, this aware being, that it is a part of you. It is more than a part of you. It is who you are in truth. You are the being, just simply being. Silent, aware, awake. And there is an alertness in awareness. The alertness is awareness, aware. The aliveness is consciousness, consciously awake to itself. So there is this deep, silent, still peace. And yet there is an aliveness here that is the awakeness of the field of pure consciousness. And when the awakeness of the field of pure consciousness is resting and still and not moving in habituated, distorted patterns, pure awareness can see itself. There's a crystal mirror reflection where true essence nature, the pure aware being, remembers itself, sees itself in the light of its own awake awareness. It illuminates its own essence nature. And the illumination is this radiant recognition. Oh, this is what I am. This is what I am in truth. This is what I have always been. I have never been a limited person. I have never been separated. I have never been the mind or the body. What I have always been is this pure, awake being that is aware and not defined or limited by the mind or body consciousness. Never been limited by thought or belief or concept, and not limited now. This is the remembering of the pure, immaculate being that is the true essence nature. So when we speak of following everything back to its source, this is the source of all. Where does anything come from? Where do thoughts come from? Where do feelings come from? Where does the appearance of creation come from? Try to find the source, and you will always arrive here in the felt sense of your own presence. Who are you in truth? Follow it back. Try to find out the source of what you are. Follow the I back to the I am presence, and you arrive naturally here in the presence of being. And the mind will say, well, I don't know. But when the mind doesn't know, you are in the grace of openness. When the mind doesn't know, you are in the grace and the source of the open field of awake awareness. This recognition is not something that the mind can understand or take hold of. It is the recognition that invites surrender of mind consciousness deeper and deeper, all the way into this true essence nature. So from the first opening and recognition, the process of unity is this surrender of all the discordant patterns of consciousness and all of the misunderstandings of the mind into the oneness, the field of pure consciousness. And this happens naturally when you are consciously awake to yourself as consciousness. Then you can consciously receive yourself in the whole flow of life, in surrender. And as life surrenders into itself, there is a deeper and deeper remembering in consciousness itself of the true essence nature and the oneness of all that is. And the grace, of course, is that it is natural. It's completely natural. There is no doing involved, no learning involved. And yet we can share the intelligence of the mechanisms of consciousness that can support the possibility of recognizing how this all works in order that there can be a deeper and deeper receiving of yourself as consciousness. This is not about someone. This is not personal. This is about consciousness awakening to itself and opening to more of itself and seeing through the veils of obscuration that can generally pull the attention into identification and distraction. And so in this, it's an alignment with being consciousness. And the alignment is restoring this natural connection to the essence, nature, being the being. And in this, a restoration of trust in nature, a trust in love, a trust of truth, of God. It doesn't matter what words we use. It's all about the resonance of recognition. It's about a trust in nature, the natural flow, trusting the naturalness, and that the naturalness knows how. The natural intelligence comes online when we open to being the being and we surrender the attempts to mentally understand. Being consciousness, being the being, we open to the natural intelligence. And when we open to the natural intelligence, there's a natural trust. Life trusts life. Love trusts love. Nature trusts nature. And in this, we have the possibility that grace will invite, through the appearance of creation, grace will invite a seeing of the light essence in everything. It will invite us to see through individuality, see through the imbalance of personhood and the personal. It will invite us to see through the conditionings and patternings of consciousness that hold us in limitation, so that everything can be freed into the remembering of this glory as who we are and who we have always been. So then we are aligning in being with nature, natural flow, natural balancing, natural harmonizing. And in this, we are opening to the great universal evolutionary process of consciousness consciously awakening to itself. And our role in this is to be the living awakeness of the being, which then uplifts the collective consciousness that is in this natural evolutionary process. We cannot affect this in the external world, in the discordant patterning. We can only affect it by aligning and remembering, recognizing the being that we are, and opening to the finer and finer frequencies of our true essence nature. And the invitation of consciousness is to be conscious in every moment, to be awake and aware in every moment, to feel the fine frequencies of your own consciousness in every moment, and receive the grace of being able to transmute the discordant patternings, transmute the discordance. It's not personal, although to start with, it feels personal. But as you transmute the personal, the seemingly personal discordance, you free those discordant patternings in the collective. And you also free any sense of allegiance and collaboration with the collective imbalance, which is ignorance, right? So we're freeing, in a way, the sense of personal and personhood from the patterns of dependence, the patterns of imbalance, the patterns that creates the sense of separation. We're freeing all of that discordance and aligning with the awakeness of being. And we're opening to the profundity. We're opening to the light of true essence nature. And when we open to the light of the being of essence nature, we're opening to divine light. And as we open to divine light, we are opening to the Sat Guru. We're opening to the guiding light. Sat Guru is this universal process. And when we open to the being, we're opening to this natural, profound guidance that is the light, the guiding light, that is the divine light. And here we meet in the oneness of being. When we meet in the oneness of being, the guiding light is this universal process that is naturally always happening. We could say 24/7 in our human language, but what we are speaking of is eternal, eternity, the flow of eternity. And 24/7, you are the eternal, timeless being. Until we see through 24/7 to recognize the always is the eternal, forever nature, your true essence nature. And now when you are aligned 24/7, you are living this abiding truth. You are fully aligned in the oneness. You never leave yourself. And when you never leave yourself, you are no longer of time. You are no longer limited in personhood. You are living as the eternal, timeless being. You are living as the Immaculate One, fully aligned in your universal nature. And here you are then one with the natural evolutionary process. You align and connect in with this evolutionary process wherever your consciousness allows you to enter. Depending on the maturity and the readiness, you enter the whole process of the field of oneness. You enter, let's say, the divine wholeness. You enter the supreme being. You enter Ma, divine light, God. Wherever you can enter, you are already in the knowing of the oneness. And yet, of course, you do not explode in the fullness, because generally the consciousness and the level of refinement won't allow that. So it is through refinement that we open to finer and finer frequencies of our divine nature. And as there is a readiness and a refinement, and the nervous system, let's say, is cultured to receive finer frequencies, the nervous system is consciousness. The nervous system is not a personal nervous system, although when it's stressed and frazzled, it can feel so. It is the universal process. And as we align with the being, we are aligning with this universal process. We are aligning with the cosmic nature, let's say. The universal process is the cosmic nature. So we align with the cosmic nature, cosmic consciousness. And in this, we are already opening to the unified field. But it takes more refinement to really be the unified field in the knowing, right? In the perception. It requires for the perspective to shift. The perspective shifts in consciousness, and then it requires for the subtle perception of the intelligence of consciousness to open, which is the opening to the finer frequencies, the finer resonances, the finer feelings, right? So the starting point of this is being conscious in every moment, being awake and aware and feeling the feelings. So feeling the feelings is the first possibility. But what we start to notice is that as we feel the feelings, we start to awaken to finer subtleties of the feelings. We start to be able to tolerate more discomfort and be more present with discomfort, because we're more able, let's say, we have more of an ability to transmute the discordant more consciously. When we can be with discomfort, we are consciously transmuting discordant patterns and not being pulled into moving with the pattern in old, habitual, conditioned ways. When we can be with the finer feelings and the discordance, we can transmute. We are the vehicle for this transmutation. We come to recognize that the body, we could say, the true body is a vehicle of transmutation. It's not the physicality, it's really the subtle body that is transmuting. So in a way, feeling, in the first instance, feeling the feelings like the triggers, the charge, the resistance, the stress, feeling these as feelings is the opening into subtle perception. Being able to feel even the emotions is a really important part of this unfolding, because we have been so habituated in the human condition to not even feel our own emotions, to try to get away from these pushed down parts of ourselves, these suppressed tensions and upsets. So we have to meet these parts first. Perhaps you can start to feel now in consciousness, not in the mind's understanding, but in consciousness, a sense of the enormity of the map that we are bringing into awareness, the enormity and the profundity of this evolutionary process in consciousness. And yet you can be aware of the finer frequencies, even when you're still in the process of having to meet your emotions that can get a little wayward and out of control. It doesn't open in a linear way, right? And yet, of course, as we open to finer frequencies, our ability to transmute our wayward emotions becomes much more natural. The transmutation process is much smoother because we can be more easily with fine feelings and discomfort. But even if we are still bound in certain stresses and emotions, the consciousness can start to open to sense the enormity and profundity of what is being pointed to here. That we can still open and align through being the being, through the presence, to this universal process, through opening to sense the cosmic consciousness. When consciousness is consciously awake and aware of itself, it is sensing its cosmic nature. And this is the aliveness. And what you notice here as consciousness, consciously awake and aware of itself, is the aliveness, and that the aliveness is everywhere, that the aliveness is not limited to any location, that the aliveness is everywhere. This is a clear noticing that happens in consciousness, because consciousness starts to consciously recognize its unbounded nature. So the felt sense is that I am everywhere, or I am nowhere, or I don't know where I am. I can't find myself, because the sense of your consciousness expands out of the mind consciousness that's constantly limiting itself, and the body consciousness that's constantly limiting itself, that consciousness starts to recognize its unlimited nature, the infinite nature, the boundless nature. And so then the felt sense of yourself starts to feel much more spacious and expanded. And of course, this is not an understanding with the mind. This is the conscious recognition in consciousness of the true essence nature that is unbounded and free, always, naturally. And so as these words come, there's an invitation in consciousness through the resonance to join in the resonance of being, to align, attune in the resonance of being to the finer conscious frequencies of yourself, just simply being, through feeling the felt sense of being. In a way, it can spontaneously open as these words come, that you suddenly realize that you're attuned and recognizing what is being pointed to. You recognize that you're suddenly feeling the alive presence that is everywhere. You're suddenly one with the resonance that what is speaking and what is listening is the same. That this feels like yourself speaking to yourself. And there's just a natural flowing receptivity, a natural awake, aware receptivity of yourself. So there's nothing to do. It's really, really about being carried with the resonance into yourself, into the deeper, finer frequencies of yourself. Recognize the felt sense of being. Recognize the silence, the deeper enlivened silence, the deeper enlivened stillness. Recognize the aliveness of the presence, of your presence, and that the aliveness of your presence is everywhere, uncontained, unbounded. Recognize the felt sense of being, and that the innermost being knows itself without question. The felt sense of the innermost being knowing itself is like a silent song that says, yes, yes, this is what I am. There's a knowing in the being, and the confirmation is in the being itself. We could say the confirmation is in the heart. What is the heart? The heart is the felt sense of the center of the being, the innermost being. The heart is this openness, this wideness in the felt sense of being. The confirmation is here in the innermost being that knows, that is smiling in the knowing of itself. The smiling is the natural happiness, the natural contentedness, the gentleness, the softness of just being open and knowing yourself here without a name, without a story, just being the openness. And here there is a naturalness, being yourself. It's like you fall open, you fall into yourself. It's not a doing, it's like a spontaneous recognition that you are right here in the oneness of being, open, illuminated as the light of awareness, awareness awake to itself as the silent peace, as the stillness. The knowing of yourself is in the deep silent depths of the peace, in the deep silent depths that are still and unmoving. The knowing of yourself is here. It's like a remembering, a recognizing, remembering this is the essence nature. This is your naturalness, your openness, your softness. This is your purity, your divine purity. This is the light, the radiant light, where the being knows itself and is so bright in the illumination of itself as the knowing. And the knowing is the alive presence of being, simply being itself. And here you are, just as you are, just as you have always been. There's a sense of familiarity here, a sense of openness, can feel your own presence. Do not look with the mind. Just be here as you are. Any sense of going towards mind consciousness will feel like a contraction. And if that is to happen, it's just to be aware of that. And in the awareness of it, just simply being the stillness, the openness will present itself again. It will come forward just in the sense of being, the openness, the silence, the stillness. It comes forward naturally. So we are speaking of an alignment in the recognition of the cosmic consciousness, in the remembering of this universal awakeness that is always here and that you have always been, that you have always been free. However you can feel the resonance of this, it is to say yes and yes and yes. It's the alignment here that opens to the flow of grace, opens to the light of Satguru that is guiding the way deeper into the fullness and perfection of divine wholeness. It's an alignment with true nature, with nature that nature knows how to balance and harmonize, that nature is life, unconditioned, flowing in the knowing of itself, and in a perpetual surrender into itself. That there is no moment that ever needs to be grasped. Every moment is life in surrender into itself, collapsing into itself. Nothing to hang on to, nothing to know, just to be the flow of nature, the flow of life, natural and free. Perhaps you can start to feel the different finer layers of frequency. We could call it like it's multi-dimensional, but it's finer than that. It's really finer frequencies, and we can open to finer and subtle frequencies and the denser frequencies. The more that we open, we can feel the multi layers of frequency and vibration. So we can feel the letting go into the being and the sense of the point. And we can also feel the incredible profundity of the cosmic process and the cosmic universal evolutionary process of consciousness that we are opening to, something so vast, immeasurable, unfathomable, unknowable. And it's only in the willingness to let go of knowing and ideas and concepts that we can truly be one with this unfathomable, unknowable, incredible infinity that you are in truth, that we can open into our own openness, and in the recognition of our own openness, we are open as the openness to the whole field, the whole landscape of divinity, the whole landscape of light. And here there is a natural refinement in the consciousness to refine and culture itself to know itself and open to more of itself. So we say yes to the light of being, yes to the light, trusting the light, trusting nature, trusting in this alignment that nature knows, and that we do not have to hang on to control and position, that it is all of that that is conditioned to hold on, that is acting as obscuration, that keeps us from truly letting go all the way into this unfathomable divine light. But as we come to the being, we come to the alignment. And as we come to the alignment and, let's say, be fully available for grace, then grace can carry us. And we start to recognize that grace carrying us is, again, it is part of this alignment. When we are opening, we're opening to the flow of grace that will create the exact appearances in the life that are needed to reflect the parts that are suppressed and hidden. That grace will create exactly what is needed to surface the unconscious material. Grace will create what is needed so that we can transmute through the finer and finer feelings all that keeps us in karmic obscuration. And in that process, we are in natural service to the whole as we transmute what seems to be personal into the impersonal. We free the patterns and uplift the collective consciousness. And then the living of this in every moment is uplifting the whole. The more we are living this truth, we are resonating at a finer frequency. The whole, let's say, the life that is animating the form is resonating at a finer frequency. And the more that we are joined in union, the remembering of union with God, we are resonating in the frequency of that joining. We are resonating at the frequency of what we are open to. And the resonance of that frequency is an emanation of that divine on the surface of life, and is supporting the divine to get to the surface of life, to shine, to love, to emanate the wholeness. This is the universal process that is underway. It's a divine process that is underway. And wherever we come into alignment with this, we are letting go of the ignorance of the dark age, and we are aligning with the age of enlightenment, the frequency of truth, Satya Loka. We're aligning with the frequency of truth. We are making the allegiance through our lived knowing of the being with divine wholeness. We are moving through everything that needs to be moved through to know this immaculate, pure divinity as what we are. So the power of being, the power of presence is beyond the mind's understanding. And yet this is why there is such a pull into this truth. This is why it is so compelling. And this is why we want to keep aligning and holding the light for the parts of the ego patterning that are conditioned to not trust, to fear, and to stay separate. It is to keep illuminating the way so that these old patterns can fully surrender into the light. There is a way, of course, that the divine wholeness, the divine light is already absolutely, supremely whole, complete, and in the self-sustaining knowing of that, that does not need anything. And yet that is currently playing as all of this in order that all of this can so too know this truth. The universal process is the divine upliftment. It is the age of enlightenment. There is nothing personal. There is nothing to get. It is just to receive yourself in the resonance, in the resonance, in the silence of being, in the knowing that recognizes this truth. The power is in the recognition. It is a power that is untouchable. The power is the light. The power is the glory. So to notice the enlivenment of the silence, notice the aliveness of the field, that the stillness itself, the silence itself is so alive in the recognition of itself just simply being. The essence nature, the pure, silent, aware being. That the recognition is that, the recognition of yourself as the silence, as the being, simply being, seeing through the illusion of separation, seeing through the illusion of the me and the personhood, to be the shining magnificence of being, the glory.